Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to the Meiji Guillotine Murders by Fūtarō Yamada, translated by Bryan Karetnyk. Eyes and legs. The following relates the particulars of an exceptionally difficult case in which the witness reported having seen through a telescope a woman's leg being cut off. Although the leg was recovered, no victim could be found. From a report made by Chief Inspector Toshiyoshi Kawaji of the Imperial Prosecuting Office. Chapter 1. It was a certain day in the 8th lunar month of the 3rd year of Meiji, and an intriguing item had arrived from France for Esmeralda. It was a brand new kind of double telescope. She said that she wanted to go to the Tsukiji Hotel again to take a look at Tokyo from the bell tower. So Kazuki had asked Kawaji whether he would care to join them and try out the instrument. It turned out to be a pair of Bollinger binoculars. Kawaji had seen the singular kind of telescope before, but never anything as elaborate as this. So he agreed without any hesitation, thinking it a marvelous idea to survey the city. They bundled Esmeralda into a palanquin and, with autumn already in the air, the three of them set off for the Tsukiji foreign settlement. In the guardhouse at the Shinpukuji bridge leading into the settlement, Sergeant Saruki was sitting alone in his chair, staring vacantly at a stack of coins on his desk. As ever, they had probably been swindled out of members of the public. When he saw the three figures pass by in front of the guardhouse, he quickly thrust the coins into his pocket and, hiding his astonishment, grinned at them broadly, like a monkey, before going after them, his enormous shoes clattering against the ground. When Kazuki told him the purpose of their visit, he immediately asked whether he might have the honor of accompanying them. Eventually, when the four reached the top of the nearly 100-foot tower, they took out the binoculars. The view of Tokyo through them was truly exceptional. It felt as though they were looking at a city in an entirely different world. Even the ordinarily reticent Kawaji cried out in wonder several times.
Wow! Amazing!
How does this compare with Paris, Miss Esmeralda? He asked earnestly. Surely Paris can't hold a candle to this? Esmeralda merely laughed and said nothing. One by one, they each took a turn with the binoculars, and when the commotion had died down, another voice asked,
Excuse me, but may I take a look?
It was a boy of around 10 who had come up with a porter while they had all been admiring the view. With his forelock and pristine hakama, He looked every bit the child of a samurai. He even carried a short sword. Kazuki had noticed the young lad's fascination with the binoculars and that he had been hesitant to ask up to that point. So he had in fact already been intending to show them to the boy. But since the very moment Saruki had set the binoculars before his eyes, he had been loath to let them go. "For goodness sake, Sergeant, will you let the child have a turn?" Kazuki exclaimed, "and show him how to use them." After a few moments, while observing the boy as his cheeks flushed and he aimed the binoculars in every which direction, Kazuki asked the porter, "Is he the son of one of your guests?" "No, sir," the porter replied. "He just came in and asked if he could visit the tower." As a rule, of course, only guests were permitted to go up there. "I believe, sir, that he came to take a look at the church here in the foreign settlement, and that he availed himself of the opportunity to stop by en route," the young chap asked so politely that I felt quite compelled to show him up. "The church, you say?" Come to think of it, the child had an unusual, almost European look about him. He was not a child of mixed parentage, but a Japanese boy, to be sure. However, his features were deeply chiseled for his years, and he had none of the youthful beauty one would ordinarily associate with a boy of his age. For all that, his face was uncommonly intelligent, and he looked as though he had a will of iron. It was unusual, at any rate, that he had come all by himself to the foreign settlement to see the church and the hotel tower. Hearing this, Kazuki walked over to the boy and asked him what he would like to look at, helping him to adjust the binoculars. "Are you from Tokyo?" Kazuki asked. "No, I'm from Takasaki in Joshu." "From Takasaki? Is that where your father is?" "No, he's in Iwanomaki in Oshu. He's a judge. My family lives in Takasaki," the boy answered crisply as he continued to look through the binoculars. "So, have you come to Tokyo all by yourself?" "Yes, at my father's behest, to learn English. I'm enrolled in a school run by an English lady." "Well, that's excellent, isn't it? I hear that you're on your way to see the church. Did your teacher tell you to go there?" "No, a friend told me to go because he thought it was funny." "Funny?" "Yes. He said there's a Western lady who taps a big box and music comes out. And then they sing songs in English. But these binoculars are much more fun." Belated though the sensation might have been, Kazuki felt a keen awareness that they were now living in a new era. "You speak very properly for a young lad who's only recently arrived in the capital. There isn't a trace of any provincial accent." "That's because I was born in Tokyo and lived in Koishikawa until I was 7, the boy replied. "And my father used to be a samurai in the Takasaki domain's Edo residence. He still lives in his lordship's mansion even now." "Just how old are you, young man?" 10. "And your name is?" "Kanzo Ochimura." Just then, the boy suddenly cried out in surprise.
Ah!
"What is it?" Kazuki asked.
Over there! There's a man and a woman doing something strange!
"What? Let me see!" Flustered, Kazuki snatched the binoculars. "Where?"
Beside the church, third building to the left, first floor.
"Hang on a minute." Kazuki scoured the city below with the binoculars.
It's a western building, second window from the right.
A few moments later, the binoculars found their objective, and Kazuki himself cried out in surprise.
Ah!
"What can you see?" asked Kawaji, as he, Saruki, and even Esmeralda gathered around with inquisitive eyes. Through the large glass window, Kazuki could see a woman lying on a bed and a man standing beside her. The room was clearly decorated in the Western style, but the man and woman were not Westerners. They looked Japanese. A little off to the side was another man. The strange act to which the boy had just alluded was apparently that one of the men had picked the woman up and laid her on the bed. Of course, even without the presence of the other man, this was not the sort of scene that one witnessed every day. What had surprised Kazuki, however, was the realization that the woman was in fact not a woman at all. In those days, the so-called Tanosuke cut, a sort of chignon, was popular among young women, and Kazuki had realized that the woman in question was none other than the originator of this style. "It's Tanosuke Sawamura!" he exclaimed. The binoculars were snatched away from Kazuki in turn, and Kawaji spent several minutes looking through them intently. "I know that man. I'm sure that's Tateki Maki from the Ministry of Popular Affairs," he said. "But who could the other one be? Judging by that expressionless face and those garish clothes, I'd say he must be another actor." It was now Esmeralda's turn to take the binoculars. Kazuki explained to her that, though the figure might have looked like a woman, he was really what was called an onagata, a male kabuki actor who specializes in playing female roles. Yet no matter how he tried to convince her, Esmeralda refused to believe him. As the Razotsu waited impatiently for Esmeralda to give him a turn with the binoculars, Kawaji cried out sternly, "Saruki, over there!" and walked briskly over to the top of the spiral staircase. "Yes, sir?" "There's something fishy about a government official and an onagata of dubious repute being found together in a western house in the foreign settlement. We're going to check it out." After watching the two of them go, Kazuki took the binoculars and peered through them once more. The three figures in the glass window had vanished. Chapter 2. It was a journey of around 15 minutes by foot when Kawaji and Saruki finally located the house. They were told that the three men had left by a rickshaw 5 minutes ago. The house was deserted, with only an old man there acting as caretaker. All this was relayed back to Kazuki and the others at the Tsukiji Hotel when they returned there. "What were they doing in an uninhabited house?" asked Kazuki. "Well, I said it was deserted, and there indeed are a lot of houses in that area without a tenant. But this one does apparently have one. And who do you think it is?" I've no idea. Ginko Kishida. Ginko Kishida. What? Well, the caretaker didn't know much, but he did say that Kishida's been renting it for more than a year. Or did he say he owned it? Kawaji recalled that Kishida had once said something to him about having a house in the foreign settlement. He said that Kishida rarely visited, but that today he'd promised to meet the 3 gentlemen there. Apparently, he sent word that he'd been called away on urgent business and couldn't make it. So the gentlemen ended up leaving shortly after they arrived. I suppose that isn't so odd then. Really? The combination of a student of Dr. Hepburne's, an official from the Ministry of Popular Affairs, and an onagata from the Kabuki Theater doesn't strike you as odd? Well, Kawaji, when you put it like that. Anyway, what kind of an actor is this Sawamura? I've never seen him on the stage, but I've heard all kinds of rumors about him. Are you sure it's really a man? Like Esmeralda, Kawaji too seemed bewildered by the beauty of the onagata he had seen through the binoculars. I've only been to the theater a couple of times myself, Kazuki added. From the latter years of the shogunate to the early years of Meiji, Tanosuke Sawamura was celebrated as one of the most beautiful onagata on the stage. So legendary was his beauty that his very name later became a byword for it. Born in 1845, the second year of Kota, the son of Sojuro Sawamura V. He had played his first leading role at the age of 15, and his first leading female role at 16. Even for the scion of a distinguished family of actors, this was an exceptional feat. Scion, a descendant child, especially a descendant of a wealthy, aristocratic, or influential family. Scion. Even for the scion of a distinguished family of actors, this was an exceptional feat. That year, he had turned 26 and had reached the very peak of his celebrity. Such was the actor's renown that Mine Imaizumi, the daughter of the renowned physician Hoshu Katsuragawa, wrote in his memoir, Lingering Dreams. He enjoyed such tremendous popularity, and people now often ask me why this was. He was truly a great actor, and he was beautiful. I do not believe I have ever seen such beauty before or since. His was not your common kind of beauty, but rather a divine kind of beauty. Years later, Shoyo Tsubouchi, in his novel Portraits of Modern Students, would even describe a certain beautiful geisha thus. She was tall, with slender features, and her face was purest white. Her profile was arresting, with a high nose, and though her eyes seemed a little too bold, they were full of charm when she laughed. In her crimson lips and slender brow, she bore a striking resemblance to the stage face of the late kabuki actor Tanosuke. These days, throughout the city, all manner of Tanosuke products were sold, from rouge and face powder to collars for kimono. And the Tanosuke hairstyle as well as Tanosuke geta were much in vogue. While Imaizumi might have described Sawamura's beauty as divine, and though it was said that he was easily embarrassed, blushing like a prim young maiden who had been cloistered away from the coarseness of the world, there were also rumors that said he would whisper cutting remarks about other actors even while on stage, provoking their profound resentment of him. And that, heedless of what others might think, he led a life of excess and debauchery, enjoying the pleasures of both male and female lovers. Cloistered, being or living in or as if in a cloister. Cloister, a monastic establishment, an area within a monastery or convent to which the religious are normally restricted. Cloister. Cloistered, providing shelter from contact with the outside world. Synonyms include covert, hidden, isolated, remote, quiet, secluded, sheltered, cloistered. Blushing, it was said that he was easily embarrassed, blushing like a prim young maiden who had been cloistered away from the coarseness of the world. There were also rumors that said he would whisper cutting remarks about other actors even while on stage, provoking their profound resentment of him. And that, heedless of what others might think, he led a life of excess and debauchery, enjoying the pleasures of both male and female lovers. Among a multitude of eccentric characters, he was said to be an onagata, with a unique, almost otherworldly allure. Being no habitue of the theater, Kazuki knew none of this. Habitua. A person who may be regularly found in or at a particular place or kind of place. A devotee. Being no habituer of the theater, Kazuki knew none of this. Yet the few times he had gone there, he had been captivated. He had been captivated by the bewitching spectacle of Sawamura, and so he shared his few recollections with Kawaji. For his part, Kawaji had never been to the theater, but he had heard in his capacity as an officer of the law the salacious rumors circulating about the actor. I've heard it said that he's haunted by the vengeful ghosts of several dozen men and women. I doubt he rests easily, he muttered. On another note, I wonder who the third man was. Judging by the look on his face, Kawaji was in no mind to let the matter rest. For the next 10 days or so, Kazuki and Kawaji were too busy to meet, but on the afternoon of the 18th, they bumped into each other at the jail in Kondenmacho. The exact date is relevant because it was the day on which Tatsuo Kumoi was sent to prison, having plotted to overthrow the Satsuma Choshu government. This major political actor had been arrested some 4 months previously and imprisoned at Yonezawa in his former domain, and now he had been sent to Tokyo to be placed in Kondenmacho. And so, of course, the two chief inspectors had come to get a good look at the 26-year-old criminal. He was smaller than they had imagined, and had the delicate features of a woman. And yet his bold, rebellious spirit was so much in evidence that anybody who saw him could only nod in agreement with the proceedings. Afterwards, without any particular purpose in mind, the two of them sauntered leisurely towards the Asakusa Bridge, discussing Kumoi. You don't have any sympathy for Kumoi's motives by any chance, do you, Kazuki? What makes you say that? Kazuki laughed. I always thought that he was a fool. How so? People can mobilize and plot rebellion all they like, as if the government these days can be toppled from outside. No, if they're going to topple it, it'll be an inside job. An inside job? Why? It's just a feeling. I'm no strategist. They walked on in silence. Oh, about Sawamura, said Kawaji all of a sudden. I paid Kishida a visit in Yokohama to ask him about that. Apparently, he's been a big fan of Sawamura's for some time, and it seems he hit it off well with Maki, who's also a fan. He said they'd agree to meet at his house in the foreign concession and go sea fishing. All four of them. Kishida, Maki, Sawamura, and that other guy, who it turns out was another actor by the name Rikaku Arashi. As for the house itself, he said he bought it with the intention of setting up a Western-style pharmacy in Tokyo. Anyhow, that morning, Kishida was seemingly called away on some urgent business, and so he sent a messenger to inform them. But as there were three of them, there was some kind of a mix-up, and all of them showed up, only to have to go home again, disappointed. At first I thought it was a rather odd combination, but I suppose actors must have all sorts of fans. I laughed it off and almost bought it, but then I thought, what kind of government official patronizes Onagata actors? So, just to be sure, I looked into Maki. When it came to professional matters, the indefatigable Kawaji was exceptionally dogged. Indefatigable, incapable of being fatigued, untiring. Dogged, marked by stubborn determination. Synonyms include adamant, hard-nosed, bull-headed, immovable, headstrong. When it came to professional matters, the indefatigable Kawaji was exceptionally dogged. Tateki Maki. 38 years old, born in Chōshū, Deputy Undersecretary at the Ministry of Popular Affairs. Lives in the Tawaramachi neighborhood of Asakusa with his mother and niece. Unmarried, his character is every bit as jolly as his rotund frame would suggest. And his employer reports he is both meticulous and industrious. Everybody says the only odd thing about him is that he's still single. I had Saruki do some digging, though, and it turns out that he owes vast amounts of money to loan sharks. He's very good at that sort of thing, is Saruki. Seemingly, Maki doesn't drink, gamble, womanize, or do anything else of the kind. Instead, he just lavishes money on Sawamura. It's as though he's indebted to the man. Naturally, he hides all this, and none of his colleagues knows about it. Kazuki burst out laughing. He's a bit of a queer fish, don't you think? Compared to your average person, maybe, but not for a government official. On a practical note, If his superiors find out about it, he's sure to be dismissed. As they neared the Asakusa Bridge, Kawaji let out a curious exclamation. "What is it?" Kazuki asked. "Keep your head down. One of those loan sharks I was just mentioning is heading this way." And sure enough, walking towards them was a big, burly man, accompanied by a woman. The man must have been on the wrong side of 60. 60. His greasy body sagged everywhere, and not only was he repulsive to behold, but his ugly, rapacious nature seemed to have molded his very features. Rapacious, excessively grasping or covetous. Rapacious, living on prey. Rapacious, ravenous. Synonyms include coveting, greedy, grabby, money grubbing, rapacious. But his ugly, rapacious nature seemed to have molded his very features. As for the woman, her extraordinary beauty drew Kazuki's eye, and after she passed the two men staring in wonderment at Kazuki's suikan, she hastened to avert her gaze. "They've ducked into the back alleys. Of course, he lives in Yagenbori," said Kawaji. "Maki borrows from other moneylenders too, but that guy is the main one. He owes him more than 300 ryo. His name's Kinpei Kobayashi, and although he moonlights as a loan shark, he runs a legitimate pawn shop in Yagenbori. Saruki pointed him out to me the other day when we were walking together. The man was oblivious, needless to say." "What about the woman?" "His mistress, Okinu." "His mistress? What a waste!" "They say she was once one of the most sought-after geisha in Saruwaka-cho, but clearly that life was no match for the lure of lucre." "A geisha? It's little wonder. Before that, she was the daughter of a footman to one of the shogun's bannermen. And she lives in the pawnbroker's house? The wife and mistress both live with him, although his wife is, by all accounts, bedridden." Kazuki looked at Kawaji in astonishment. "You've certainly done your research. All this prying from a pair of binoculars. The subject of the investigation, of course, is up to his neck in all this. He won't stand a chance with you setting your sights on him. Actually, it's all Saruki's work. As chance would have it, he's gone to Kobayashi's pawn shop to leave some things in pledge. That's when he spotted Maki on his way out, which led to the discovery of all his debts." Did he indeed? On another note, those binoculars. They're intriguing. Would you mind lending them to me again sometime?" "I'm afraid I don't have them anymore," said Kazuki. Kawaji's eyes widened. "Don't have them anymore?" "They were gone before I knew it. One of the resortsu usually stands guard at the house whenever I'm out, but somehow they've been pinched. Then again, they were the talk of the Saga Mansion." Chapter 3. One drizzly evening, just over a week later, at the beginning of the 9th lunar month, Chief Inspector Kawaji, dressed in hat and cape, was doing his rounds in Yanagibashi, when suddenly he noticed a man and a woman running up behind him. "Is that you, Saruki?" he asked, straining to see. "It's me, sir." It was the figure of the woman, however, that caught Kawaji's eye. Could it be the mistress of Kinpei Kobayashi, the pawnbroker, come moneylender from Yagenbori? It clearly looked like her. "What is it?" asked Kawaji.
There's been a kidnapping.
What? There isn't time to explain. You've got to help us, sir. Don't worry, we'll catch them, said Saruki, turning to the woman. They ran that way, didn't they? Towards the Ryogoku Bridge? I'll explain it on the run, sir. With that, Saruki started running again, his enormous shoes clattering on the ground. Kawaji set off after him, leaving behind the woman, her fists clenched so hard that they had turned white. What's all this about, Saruki? I was just at the Kobayashi pawn shop, sir. I'm ashamed to say it, but I'd gone there to leave something in pledge. Just as I got there, though, the young miss, well, you already know her name, sir. It's Okinu. Anyway, she comes running out, saying that her friend has just been kidnapped. Saruki was already panting as he told the tale. The friend in question is a geisha from Sarawaka-cho by the name of Kikuchiyo. She had some business to attend to, and once it was done, she climbed back into the rickshaw that had just brought her there, ready to go home. Just as she was setting off, a man appeared, brandishing a sword. Apparently, he threatened the rickshaw puller and abducted poor Kikuchiyo. As soon as I realized what had happened, I rushed after him and ran as far as the main street, and that's when I saw you. Did you know why the geisha was kidnapped? There was no time to ask for details, sir, but, my shoe! One of his enormous shoes had fallen off. Just carry it. Scalded by Kawaji, he set off again, running with one bare foot. Apparently, he means to use her to avenge his father. What? You mean by... No, it looks as though his father was killed by Kikuchiyo's older brother. He found out about this only recently, and ever since he's been sniffing about her. It was getting out of hand, so apparently she'd come to have words with him. Over there! Saruki was pointing ahead of them. That's it! She said it was a rickshaw with a collapsible hood. And sure enough, a rickshaw had just crossed the Ryogoku Bridge and was disappearing into Honjo. There were few covered rickshaws in those days, and it was traveling unusually fast. Doubtless because there was a sword-wielding man running alongside it. The two of them ran after it through the rain. Several times they almost lost sight of it, but they closed in on it at the Rakanji Temple in Itsutsume. The rickshaw had been set down outside the crumbling temple gate, but when they finally caught up with it, they found it empty. This way! Shouted Saruki, running through the temple gate. They must have gone in here. For a few moments, as he watched him, Kawaji just stood there. He looked at the Buddhist temple, dedicated to the 500 arhats, and then to the north of it, he spotted another building, the Sazedo, where 100 statues of the Bodhisattva were enshrined. Kawaji knew none of this, but still he could see the tall and narrow 3-story structure with its unusual spiral staircase wrapping around the outside of the building. The main temple had seen better days, but this bizarrely shaped 3-story pagoda was in such a terrific state of disrepair that it looked ready to collapse at any moment. There, On the staircase leading up to the third story, the kidnapper was standing with the woman, holding her arms behind her back. The rickshaw puller had probably run off and disappeared into the temple grounds. The man was in his mid-20s and wore a black crested kimono tucked up into his waistband. His features were pale and maniacal-looking. He opened his mouth like a wild beast and roared out, "They didn't send the big guns then? But this isn't just any kidnapping. My father met his end being tortured because of this one's brother." "Don't be a fool!" shouted Kawaji, even though his grasp of the situation was still rather shaky. "She wasn't the one who killed him. Let her go." "If only you knew how he was killed. They cut off both my father's arms while he was still alive, and then they cut off his head." It was at this point that Kawaji realized the man was not only hysterical, but also drunk. He groped in his pocket for his pistol. "Behold!" the man cried out. "Now I'm going to cut this girl's arms off one by one. Then I'll let her go, all right." The girl screamed and tried to escape. The rain was getting heavier, blocking Kawaji's view, and although he had managed to extract his pistol, he was worried. Through the rain, he saw the flash of a naked sword being raised high. The very next instant, however, the blade itself went flying into the air, falling at the foot of the pagoda, while somebody behind the man grabbed his arm and forced him down. Kawaji then saw a familiar figure holding a rope in his mouth. "I've got him!" the man in the suican called out. "Come and give me a hand, will you?" Saruki had returned, and he and Kawaji ran up and were dumbstruck when they discovered Kazuki standing beside a young man wearing the robes of an artisan. They seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. "A fortunate coincidence. I'm glad nobody was hurt." "Kazuki, what on earth are you doing here?" "This gentleman will explain that later," he replied, indicating the man beside him. Presently, they tied the kidnapper up and took him down the stairs for questioning. There, in the dilapidated hall, with the rain blowing in through the wooden panels, row upon row of peeling statues of the Bodhisattva stood watching the proceedings. The culprit identified himself as Heikurō Kagawa, and it was surprising to learn, in the light of his earlier insult to Kawaji's rank, that he himself worked as a minor functionary in the Grand Council of State. He was so drunk that for the first few minutes he could barely speak. But eventually, his astonishing confession came out. He was the son of Hajime Kagawa, a retainer for the Chigusa clan, who was assassinated towards the end of the Edo period. Some several years ago, Kagawa Sr. was set upon by several ronin at his house in Kyoto after it was rumored that he had conspired with Lord Aribumi Chigusa, his master, and Lord Iwakura to have a monk from Aizan lay a curse upon Emperor Komei. During the attack, Kagawa Sr. hid himself in the gap in a double wall that he had installed behind an alcove. The Ronin threatened his maid with their swords, but she was a courageous woman, and even when the blood began to flow, she insisted that she knew nothing. Then the Ronin seized Kagawa's 11-year-old son, Benojo, and threatened to take his life as an abettor to his father. It was at this point that, unable to hold back any longer, Kagawa revealed himself only to be slaughtered. First, the Ronin cut off his arms one by one, and then they beheaded him. A few days later, the head was hanged from the drum tower of the Higashi Hoganji Temple, while his right arm was unceremoniously delivered along with a threatening letter to the mansion of Lord Chigusa, and the left was sent similarly to Lord Iwakura. Among the many examples of terrorism that took place back then, Kawaji recalled this as one of the most dreadful and egregious. Conspicuous, especially conspicuously bad, flagrant. Egregious. Synonyms include blatant, flagrant, glaring, gross, obvious, striking, pronounced. Egregious. Kawaji recalled this as one of the most dreadful and egregious. And where were you at this time? On the night in question, I was, Kagawa said, shaking. I happened to be staying with a relative that night, and so I was spared the ordeal. Then, after a few moments of silence, he added quickly, several years later, I learned that the men were led by Genichiro Itami, who at the time was a retainer of the daimyo of Himeji. In the end, though, I never was able to find out where they had gone or what had become of them. But 10 days ago, I received a letter informing me that in Saruwaka-cho there was a geisha by the name of Kikuchiyo, and that she was Itami's sister. He seemed to have sobered up considerably. A meekness and nervousness now appeared in his face, which had turned pale, as though he had caught a cold. I'm well aware that to take revenge on the assassin's sister is misguided. But when I think of the way in which my father was killed, I can't help feeling bitter. What makes matters worse is that the letter said that Itami died peacefully several years ago in the comfort of his own bed. Then, earlier today, I was off duty and having a drink at an izakaya near my house in Yanagihara. When I looked up, there was a piece of paper with a note scribbled on it, telling me that Kikuchiyo was going to an old friend's house in Yagenbori this evening and that it was the perfect opportunity to take my revenge. What? Show me the note, demanded Kawaji. Well, you see, to give myself some Dutch courage, I must have knocked back at least a pint and a half of sake. When I remembered the note later, it was gone. Kawaji looked at Kazuki. How, then, can we be sure that you're telling the truth? Asked Kawaji. It would be pointless for me to lie. So, you meant to kidnap the girl and kill her? No, I didn't want it to go that far. But you meant to cut off one of her arms, didn't you? Said Kazuki. No, I didn't even know what I was going to do with her. Kagawa's face looked genuinely confused. At any rate, the fact alone that the lady has come to no harm doesn't absolve you of your crime. The very idea that an official of the Grand Council of State would take a sword and kidnap a lady. said Kazuki. I know. You'll have my full cooperation. No sooner had he said this, however, than he suddenly let out a desperate, high-pitched cry, bewailing his lamentable fate. Excuse me, but won't you please let him go? This unexpected phrase was uttered by none other than Kikuchiyo, the lady who had until this point been sitting there as though in a trance, seemed to have come to her senses. It's my brother who committed the crime, she said. My brother did many terrible things. Please, let this poor man go. There were tears in her eyes as she spoke. She was large, with vulgar features, but she had a kind nature. I just couldn't bear it if he were punished for this. Oh, please, won't you just let him go home? What do you say, Kawaji? Shall we leave it here for now? After all, no real harm was done. Kawaji said nothing. He watched in silence as Kazuki untied the rope and Kagawa bowed 2 or 3 times, placing his head to the dust-laden floor before staggering out of the pagoda, a wave of drink seeming to hit him once again. I wonder who it could have been, the person who incited him to take a revenge. If such a person really exists, that is, Kawaji muttered to himself. Kazuki just looked at him quizzically. Then Kawaji turned to him. So why were you here? Up to that point, the young artisan, he could have been only 18 or 19, had been standing there in a daze, as though spellbound by it all. He bowed for the first time, began to speak. He bowed and for the first time began to speak. Because of the anti-Buddhist movement, he explained, the Rakanji temple had lost most of its worshippers since the restoration, and their funds had reached such a nadir that they were having to sell off the Saseido. Nadir, the point of the celestial sphere that is directly opposite the zenith and vertically downward from the observer. Nadir, the lowest point. Synonyms include basement, bottom, foot, rock, base. Nadir. Since the restoration, and their funds had reached such a nadir that they were having to sell off the Saseido. The pagoda had been bought by a demolition business that wanted the place solely for timber. Only the Saseido had 3 entire floors dedicated to the goddess of mercy, and those 100 statues which had been donated to the temple to repose the spirits of the dead in the hereafter had been carved by master craftsmen in ancient times, and so there was much there that he wanted to preserve, if only for the artistry. Of all the statues of the deity, however, those decorated with gold leaf had been bought up by a goldsmith. Apparently, he wanted to burn them, collect the ashes, and extract the left-over gold. When he heard about this, the sculptor, his name was Kozo Takamura, had pleaded with the goldsmith to spare at least 5 of them from the ashes, but his plea had fallen on deaf ears. I was at a loss, he said, but then I remembered a certain acquaintance of mine. I asked Kazuki here if he would mind having a word on my behalf, and so I brought him here first to show him the statues. The divine grace of the Bodhisattva is miraculous, don't you think? Said Kazuki, smiling at the geisha.